it is the analogy with which John McWhorter and others like Andrew Sullivan have made to religion and Christianity in particular is useful because you have this notion of original sin. It's a sin that can never be totally redeemed. Everyone is born with it, and white guilt is kind of analogous to that because you can't get rid of being once you're white your whole life, barring any transracial surgery. You just are white, and you have that moral stain upon you, or many people view it that way. And just like as a Christian, you have to go to church every Sunday to remind yourself of what a sinner you are. When you're white and you're liberal and trying to be fully in touch with the history of racial oppression, it's not enough to learn the history once. You have to learn it over and over again. This is why I read the New York Times every day, and I hardly go a week or 2 weeks without reading something about the history of racial oppression in this country. I mean, in the past several months, I've read several pieces about the history of lynching. Right? Lynching is a decades-old crime at this point. It doesn't happen anymore. And yet, I read about lynching far more often than I read about the homicide problem. Right? I think there are two kinds of history. There's a secular history, which is you go to your class or you read a history book about World War I, you learn all the facts, learn the opposing perspectives, and then when you're done with it, you're done with it. Then there's a religious way of looking at history where it's not enough to learn it. You have to repeat it over and over and over. And I think Black history in this country, it's almost squarely in the religious history category at this point. So yeah, I mean that is connected to white guilt and original sin and various.
That's interesting. So, because I was going to ask you why it was that African American communities tend to be so connected to their history more than other racial groups that also have oppressive histories as well. And so you're saying that because it's kind of parts of the history, if I have you correct, parts of the history are repeated over and over and over, and this is what people are learning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think. Well, you see this to an extent in the Jewish community too, with the Holocaust. You have the never forget meme. There's something similar to that, and it's totally understandable, because one should never forget the atrocities of history. How can you learn from them if you don't learn about them? But there's a difference between learning a piece of history and absorbing its implications for the present and reiterating it ad nauseum, just as a mechanism of prodding white people and keeping them as guilty as possible, keeping them remembering, keeping Emmett Till's corpse right in the front view of every conversation, metaphorically speaking, so that if now I'm going to disagree with a white person on race, it's not just that we're having a disagreement between two rational people, it's I have the weight of history on my side here and all of the empathy that comes along with that. And so if I'm arguing with a white person and they're telling me that they think black on black crime is a problem, and I say, how dare you? Don't you know about slavery? Don't you know about Jim Crow? I mean, how can you reduce this to a problem of black men killing each other? And I just invoke the entire history of racial terror. That is it seems in many people's eyes to be a conversation-winning move. But it's actually not. It's actually a bad move, because history doesn't give you the answer to present-day problems in any straightforward way.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.